Hope everyone is well. And I hope you don't mind being recorded. I'm going to record this for everyone. But I'm Michael Carter Jr. with Carter Farms and Agriculture. And welcoming you to our mental health workshop, hopefully one of several workshops that we'll have related to mental health for farmers and just for people in general. We look forward to kind of elaborating more on the issue that is usually isn't talked about much, at least in Black communities. And is now starting to be talked about a lot more. We want to make sure that we allow for better and more open discussion around some of these challenges that we may face, some of these issues that we may have, especially around grief and trauma, which, you know, if you live long enough, you're going to experience some grief or possibly experience some trauma if you haven't already. And I want to welcome our speaker for the evening, Mr. Kevin Carter. Kevin Carter is a licensed social worker in Silver Spring, Maryland, the Master's of Social Work from Howard University. You could tell the last name, possibly, and the gray-haired beard. The beard, you know, we're related. And we're tapping into some of these resources. We have conversations about, Kevin and I have conversations about mental health at the farm and at and on the phone quite frequently. And I wanted to open it up and share it with our greater audience. It's about how we deal with some of these things. And as we go into the season of fall and into shorter daylight and daylight savings, which no one seems to like or want at this point in life, how do we cope with some of these things? How we deal with some of these things? What kind of resources are available? And hopefully to spawn this off into some other more meaningful things like mental health sessions and mental health kind of therapy or group therapy sessions that can happen weekly, like a group chat. So without further ado, I want to welcome my longtime cousin, man I respect and admire greatly, Mr. Kevin Carter.
Thank you, Michael. He said long term, pretty long. So that means he's been around for a while too. So just want to thank you all for joining this evening. Just want to pause and just thank the Creator and the ancestors for being here this evening. I know just by looking at the screen, people are very busy, so I consider this time sacred. I'm going to invite people to, at any point, if you have questions or concerns, if you need to pull over and ask your question, or you need to pull over and look at the screen, please do that. The first thing I want to thank you all for is for noticing. Part of the challenge that we have just as humans is noticing when there's something that might not be right about where we are in our mind, in our body, and in our spirit. And the fact that you noticed that and you started to think about that is very important. I also want to thank you all for being there for your city, state, your town, country, and the world as farmers. Many people go about their day and it tends to be all about them, but you all are taking all of us into consideration. And I will go back to where Mike started. I'm the son of a Carter farmer, John W. Carter and Anna Carter, who did not grow up on a farm, but we essentially, from the age of that I can remember, it was necessary for us to put our hand in the ground and to grow and to learn the connection between earth and us and our livelihood. So I just want to honor that before we go through tonight. I have a PowerPoint which I'm going to use. So I'm going to ask that be pulled up now. I had some videos. Doesn't seem like they're going to work, but we're going to work our way around that. I will tell you all, even though you're tired, I'm going to need your participation because I can talk, but communication is the key to where we're going tonight. So you want to go back to the beginning, that first slide. And for those who are driving, you might have to tell the person that you're riding with to answer the questions for you. You don't have to write them down, but have a little check-in, because this is really about community as they get ready to pull up the screen. And good afternoon, Ebony, and all the other souls out there. And this time, the technical difficulty is not with the oldest person on the screen. We just had a little joke about the old folks. So we are here for a mental health discussion. Mike oversold us a little bit. It's about starting to look for clarity in life. And I want to be able to, for us to have a conversation tonight. Next slide. And we bring you greetings from Carter Farms, even though I'm not sitting there right now. I think some people signed up for different places in the country, so you're probably not on the sun's not on the horizon for some of you all, but greet you in the name of our ancestors and those who are at Carter Farms doing the work now. Next slide. What I want us to do, and you can do this in the chat, and Mike and Diana can help me in the chat. I want folks to come in and give your name, city, state you're residing in. And then I want you to give us a natural source of healing on your farm or on your land. And then a health goal, perhaps for yourself and for your family. Why is that important? It's important because we need to know who we're with tonight and what we're talking about and where we are in the country. So you can unmute and do that, or put that in the chat and Mike can read some of those out for me. He didn't know I was going to have him working. So name, your city, state, natural source of healing on your farm or land, and then a health goal for yourself. And notice I'm saying health, I'm not saying mental health, because we're going to talk about how mental health is completely connected to our body and to spirit and to the land. So how about some names, city, state? I'll model. I'm Kevin Carter. Right now I'm living in Odenton, Maryland, a natural source of healing on the land that my mother is on is cedar trees. My mom actually used to have us pull cedar and other things during the Christmas season and bring a natural fragrance into the house that helped with congestion. And a health goal for myself is just to get my blood pressure down, because that impacts my mental health. Let me look in this chat. Go ahead.
Well, I got Ebony Jones. Well, before I go Ebony, I'm gonna do next Ebony. Michael Carter Jr., Orange County, Virginia. I think one of my there's a lot of places on the farm that give me a level of peace. The walnut trees and by the creek. And I find the most peace when I take my shoes off in those areas. And a health goal of mine is probably to work out more.
Okay.
And we have Ebony Jones here from Newcastle, Delaware. Resiliency is my goal, and of course, overall health in all aspects. And grounding is awesome.
You can come on if you need to, Ebony.
Oh, I'm here. Yes, he read it well. I just want to be resilient with, like you said, things in life happen. There's trauma. Some things are inevitable. And I just want to be able to bounce back, remain resilient. I always loved walking out barefooted as a child. And as I got older and learned what I was actually doing, that's something that I just love to do. You get on some nice grass or soil and just be barefoot. So that always makes me feel great. And yeah, I just want to be healthy overall in every way I can.
Thank you. And the reason why we want to talk about these things is because the source is there for us. one of our sources. And one of the sources that many of us inhabit is land, and our ability to put our feet in the earth and ground ourselves, even when we're having difficulty, or sometimes even before you're having difficulty. I see some other folks out here. I see Nana Akosua from Athens. Do you want to come on and unmute, or just want to read through?
I think she's gonna
read through. Okay.
Yeah.
We have
So Nana
Diana.
Akosua, currently Athens, Georgia, sustainability, self-sufficiency, and freedom are some goals.
And then we have Diana.
Mine is source of healing is the soil. I love the feel of the soil. I love how it feels. Love the texture when it rains, everything. And I'm learning to breathe.
Okay, very good. I'm going to give you all something here. You already know it, but I'm going to say it out loud. The reason why I'm calling on people is we are our medicine. I see two people that I've met before, and they're in the car, and I think it's with their children. They are each other's medicine. What does that mean? The healing is in us. And that's why I'm asking people to hear their voice and to hear their words, because at some level, we reach outside for help and assistance, but the healing is within us. And I see my brother on there. He might be working and being on the webinar at the same time. So if you can jump in, Greg, jump in. Name, city, state, natural source of healing.
Okay, I'm Greg Carter. I'm Kevin's brother, and Michael's cousin. I live in Warrenton, Virginia. My natural source of healing. I'm going to tell you. I lived down on the farm of the picture that you saw from the 4th grade until I graduated from high school and attended college. And the thing there's always a piece about the smell down there. The smells as far as the flowers, the smells as far as the dirt when you're planting things. The big thing, number one thing I'm going to say is what Michael said, the creek. There's a creek that runs through the back of the farm, and it was just so peaceful when I was there to go down there and just listen to the water, and you see animals and things walk up to that creek. You know, you see the rabbits, you see the deer and various things. Health goal for me, get off of some meds that I'm on. I'm on blood pressure medicine and cholesterol medicine, and I'd love to get off of those.
Very good, very good. And Nicole, as you come in, we're just checking in with name, city, state, natural source of healing, and health goal for yourself. And who else wants to speak? I'm inviting you.
Hi, this is Noelle and Reggie Lipscomb. Our farm is in Madison, Virginia. A natural source of healing on our farm are 2 ponds. I think similar to Mr. Carter, just find it very therapeutic to sit and watch the water movement and the animals. And we have one duck now that's taken up inhabit there. Something peaceful about being by the water. Health goal for, I'll say myself and our family, is to continue to make better food choices and eating. And we've implemented, I've implemented, I suppose, a no box November, where we're not buying and eating things that come in a box. So highly processed.
Love that, love that. And again, I want everybody to take that in. And this is where I want you to think about. When people talk about mental health, oftentimes they talk about simple solutions and one solution. But let's take the no box November. The no box November is about chemicals not going into your body. Certain kinds of chemicals not going in your body, which affect your thinking, which affects your sleep, which affects your elimination. And your elimination, I mean, how many people have had constipation and it makes them emotionally cranky? How many people have eaten something?
Hey, hey, brother Carter.
Uh-huh.
I just want to say, do you really expect somebody to answer that question?
Yes, sir. Look. Look, I can tell by some of the body language. I can tell by some of the body language people were with me. They just didn't want to say that. and Michael probably didn't tell you. I do ask intrusive questions, but I am kind. So so No Box November, what's gonna happen is they're probably gonna notice some things. They're gonna notice some things about their body. And then they're gonna perhaps choose to lean into those. They might even notice something about their budget, because sometimes the food in the box, you eat it and you're still hungry. Or the food through the window, as my mom would say. She would laugh that we're having this conversation. So this circle that we're creating, we're generating ideas. And Michael has already invited y'all to the farm. But if you haven't been to the farm, go down and sit at that creek at some point.
Not on you.
Continue these conversations.
Not
Whoever's
on
on iPhone, I'm inviting you in. Go right ahead. Somebody's on, they were muted. You don't have to mute. Go ahead and join us. Okay, long check-in. But we're good. Next, Mike, next slide. Okay, this is the video that we have that's not going to play. But essentially, this is an African sister who was literally doing a rain dance in South Africa. She's from a ballet company, and there was a drought in South Africa at some point. And she did a rain dance, and eventually it did rain. So what I like to do is I like to ask people what that dance reminds them of in terms of what they're dealing with in life. I've used this video all around the country, and we've gotten different responses. But since
Kevin, I can play it.
You can play it? Okay. All right. You let me ruin all the effect.
I bet.
But I want you, as Mike pulls this up, I want you to sit with this short video and think about what it reminds you of in terms of your farm life and your life in general. He's going to play it for us. And I hate to disappoint for folks who just expect an election. I can do that, but we're not doing that tonight. And I see the brother with the Howard t-shirt. He's already heard too many lectures, probably. And it'll be more exciting than the one I would give. You sure you're gonna pull that off, Mike?
I'm trying to.
Okay. We people are patient.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second. Share. Well, I'm gonna share from the. Give me a moment, please. Bear with me, everyone.
And if it doesn't work in a second, we can just move on. And you can work on that second one, because that second one is much more important than this one. Nicole, could you tell us your city and state? I might have missed that in the chat.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nicole Nunu. I'm currently living in Athens, Georgia, but I was in Virginia. I moved from Virginia to Athens in August or September. Yeah, September. So I'm true truly Virginian and all of that, but I'm also from Ghana. And so when you ask that question about what do we do, like some of the health goals and all of that, I miss some of my culturally appropriate food, like in kontomire, the peppers, things that I can relate with, the okra, not the frozen ones. And so being here in Athens, I'm making it a conscious effort to try to look around to see anyone who grows those kind of culturally appropriate foods that I can purchase and then start eating them, because I'm noticing a difference in the way I feel based on the food that I eat. So yeah, I like to, it's difficult, of course, to find those things. I have to supplement or substitute things all the time, but I'm hoping that our Black farmers will pick up some of those culturally appropriate vegetables and fruits and to give us, the ability to also purchase them. So yeah.
Love
you.
that, Nicole. And I want you all to think about what Nicole said. When oftentimes, particularly in our community, we tell people it's all in their head. It's all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you. What's your problem? And she's talking about what you put into your body affects how she feels. Not just how she feels emotionally, but how she feels energetically. Because your energy is directly connected to your mental health and your physical health. Go ahead and give it a shot, Mike. See if you can work on the volume. We'll go without the volume. That's fine. And this is very hard to do. No, it might not be hard to do for us. We're very intuitive people. Based on what you saw, because you didn't get to hear, what in that video reminds you of farm life? What, if anything, in that video reminds you of farm life? In your life in general? And there are no right or wrong answers. Somebody jump out there for me.
The uncertainty of nature.
Yes. Yes.
And being dependent upon that for your livelihood or existence.
All of us, and particularly all of you, are very dependent on nature. And you look to it as a source. And it affects your movement. What else?
It's peaceful.
It's peaceful.
So in so she did this one move where she just dropped down to the platform and was very flexible.
Mhm.
And my wife and I, we both started laughing at the same time. But it made me think about how in farming you have to be flexible in everything you do. Like you can plan whatever you need to plan, but because we're dependent on Mother Nature, et cetera, we have to go with the flow. We got to be agile, and not so stuck in we have to do this or have to do that, but also understand the importance of planning.
Yes, absolutely. All of what everybody has said in your farm life and in your life in general are very necessary. The flexibility.
One other
That is
thing,
something- Go ahead. The next person, I can't see who it is, but go ahead.
So I was just going to add that there's the flexibility, that there is beauty in the fluidity, and that, being able to move and operate with nature in a way that you just have to, be flexible, be agile, be fluid. If you step back and look at the total picture, there's just beauty in it.
Yes, absolutely.
another thing that caught my attention was at the end, they said it was a ballet. So I'm imagining this probably wasn't a natural indigenous dance, but more a ballet Eurocentric style dancing. And sometimes you have to use other cultures to make things happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was actually adapted from a natural dance into the ballet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that modification that you talk about is very important in our life, and particularly in farm life. I can remember my father, my uncles, and my grandmother and my cousins having to modify one thing to do another. Having to borrow from one thing to get another thing done, because that thing had to be done. And if that thing wasn't done, maybe that animal wasn't taken care of, or that crop didn't go in that day when it needed to go in that day because you had to move on to something else. And then if it didn't go into that day, what's the backup? So remember that flexibility as we move forward. Thank you, Mike, for being diligent and looking that up. And for those who want to take a sound look at that, take a screenshot and check it out. You can go to the next slide.
Now I went to the next slide on my computer, but it's not on my, give me a second.
On your screen yet? That's okay.
All right.
While we're waiting for that, I would chime in and say, since we're talking about, mental health and that type of thing, it is very important that when you say you're going to do something, that you do it, right? Especially when it comes to like farming, especially if you're going to be helping, let's say, another farmer, or helping anybody in general, because probably not intentionally, but we say we're going to go help somebody do something, and then that doesn't happen. We've literally put an unnecessary amount of stress on that person, and then causes that person to now second guess you and second guess others. When you're trying to do different things, and I bring that up specifically because I was talking to a farmer earlier today, and there's different types of grants out, and all this type of thing. And he had said that he was so reluctant to go out and pursue any of them because he always had this idea in his head, hey, there's nothing out there for free. And so that basically gave him a little bit of an angst when it came to dealing with, as a friend of mine would say, the dominant culture when it comes to the grant programs and things of that nature. But in essence, it put a level of, he already had a level of distrust just based on historical things, but just the way things are going now in general, it puts us in a pretty significant place of stress. You know what I mean? This kind of, it's unnecessary, but it's there. You have to deal with it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you gave like the perfect segue into what we have on the screen, because people tend to put individuals in a box. They put mental health in a box, but I'm asking us tonight to look at the whole body, not just our individual bodies, but the body that impacts us. And when I use this diagram when I'm teaching on trauma, but really it's really about, let's look at our whole system. At the highest level, there's a spirit world, and then there's a physical landscape. Many people take all of that for granted. I'm going to say that again. There's a spirit world and a land world. As farmers, you particularly can't escape the land. Because as an individual, and I'm going to use the example that the brother just used, an individual might want to utilize his family farm to access the government program that he is paying taxes for, but he might have a concern about accessing that program because of his history in this country, his history of oppression, his history of applying for programs for 30 years and not getting those grants, not getting those loans. That puts a different kind of pressure on him than someone who may have gotten those loans, and someone who may have a larger family, who may have more land. And most of us know that all of the land that we've ever had, there was always a spiritual element to being connected to that land. But we cannot ignore the social elements, the historical forces. We have a 100-year farm. We have to look at the history that helped maintain that, but also what is the physical and emotional and spiritual cost of maintaining that land. And why I keep saying this is an embodied approach, because it falls on everybody's body. For those of you who have children, the work that you do on the farm falls on your child's body. It falls on their schoolwork. It falls on how you get along with the neighbors. So for example, as the brother said, you don't keep your fence together, cows are eating up somebody else's stuff in the yard, and then you have a problem with your neighbor if you don't know your neighbor. And that's stress. Because you might not have the resources all the way down this chain. And that chain starts with spirit, landscape, social norms. What are some of the social norms? Who lives where? Who gets to buy land? What laws rule who buys land and who gets land? And then, even when you have the laws, how does the institution interpret them? And let's just go into this for 1 second as a historical context. We had a law that said that the schools were supposed to be desegregated, but we had to get a second law, Brown 2, to get desegregation, and then still didn't go into effect in some places until 1968 or later. So laws don't necessarily rule institutions and communities, because you have networks that come together to interpret those laws, but also enforce them or allow people to do what they need to do. But then you come down to the individual. I don't know a farmer that can be a farmer alone. because they have to buy something from somebody. It might be fertilizer. They might have to sell what it is that they're making to somebody. Or they share that with their family. Farming is isolating and in some ways, but it's also stretched out to community. I want a couple of people, if it's okay, to talk about how parts of one of these blocks, it might be community, institution, social norms, might be landscape, it might be spirit. How is that impacting your well-being as a farmer? And Nicole kind of already did it, and I forget the brother's name. That's my Howardite, but I just call him my brother because I can't remember anybody's name, including my own sometimes. So pick one of these institutions and talk about how it is shaping your farm life. It might be community. How is your community shaping your farm life? And I'm gonna give you all an example. Our friend Roland Terrell grew greens. I picked the greens and I took the greens to my mother's house, and she was smiling because this was the first time she's had those greens in that kind of way this year. And it made her reminisce, and it made her talk about how sweet those greens were and how beautiful that was for her. All I had to do was go pick them because Roland had done his job. Nicole.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great one. So when I was in Virginia, Michael Carter Jr. He grows, or he nourishes a lot of African ethnic vegetables, like the contumely I mentioned. And then there was one time he brought a whole box of garden eggs that I'm used to, because I'm not used to eggplants. I use garden eggs which are white, and I mean they are different, sweeter, nicer, like juicier. And he got me like a whole box of it, and I cannot tell you how I was jumping the whole time. I spread the information to other African colleagues. They would come and to my house and knock, and I'm like, nope, I'm not sharing. And then I realized, well, I have to share, right? So then the Scotch bonnet peppers, like I froze them up, and then I don't know if there's something expensive here that you feel like you have to pinch it like piece by piece just to make sure that it doesn't get finished. That's the way I was eating those Scotch bonnet peppers. And so it's the joy in food for me, that community, Michael being that connector or that connection to my ethnic food for me. And so, yeah, I was really appreciative of that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So when you're thinking mental health, and when you're thinking people, and when you're thinking about particularly us, thinking bodies, because part of what the impact society is, it disembodies us from our thoughts and feelings and from our spirit. So people tell us, again, it's all in your head. It's in my head, it's in my body, and it's in my relationships. If I have depression, it impacts my wife. If I have depression, it impacts my mother, my brothers, everybody around me. And having depression is not a sin. It's a natural part of being human. And that doesn't mean I have a diagnosis, but I do have sadness, or I have periods of sadness. I mean, who's going to always be able to bounce back from having their crops not come through for 3 years in a row? We're still bouncing back from COVID right now because of the impact on farming and economics, the whole social norms of economics and institutions. People are fighting on a daily basis. Who goes back to work? How do they come back to work? And that's impacting what you all do. Even though you might not be in those workplaces, it's impacting us all. Is this making sense to folks? If it is, give me a thumbs up, head up and down. And again, it is about our bodies and our health. It's not separate from our mental health, because that's part of what people do. Again, is mental health is for those people, whoever those people might be. And we want to be able to embrace our whole selves. We were endowed with wholeness. And part of what stress and trauma and systems do is they take our wholeness away from us. But I know for sure that we still have access to our wholeness. I have a hand up. Please go. Please jump in.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Miller, and I was just going to say that really resonated with me because I was so driven, working a lot in corporate America. And when I really took the time to reconnect with the land, my whole life changed. You know, that reverence that we have when we work with the land, it makes such a great impact on like my day-to-day living situation. Like you're saying, it's in our body, it's in the decisions that we make. I mean, everything is just influenced, you know, by these at times external factors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know, I'm not a scientist, but we are the land. The land is us. And people might think that's just a biblical thing. I'm not a biblical scholar, but we are connected to those creeks and those oceans. Our bodies in some ways are made out of the same things. So when we get separated, we have to notice, like you all are noticing, that we're separated. Does that solve all of our trauma? No, but it gives us a pathway to find some ease and to understand, even if we don't understand intellectually, our bodies will understand that is soothing. That helps me. And as someone said, they're learning how to breathe. One of the biggest struggles that we have in mental health care and in care with people in general is when people ask people to learn breathing techniques, they say, I don't have time for that. Now, the last time I checked, because I'm not looking at everybody's face, everybody is breathing right now. So why would you not have time to figure out how to breathe more healthy for yourself? For those of us who played some sports, or even those who just work on the farm, you have to pay attention to your breathing to do that hard work. So you're already doing it. And I'm going to invoke my father right now. He used to have a term, y'all are making me so upset, you're making my head swim. And after I got older, I started to think about that was probably his stress kicking in. And when his stress kicked in, it affected how he thought and how his brain worked. So he was really being a scientist of his own body by relating to that. But what happened is we made a joke out of it because it was funny, because he was known for saying, y'all make me so upset, you make my head swim. But I just thought that was brilliant, because, and the part of why I'm bringing this up is I said we are each other's medicine, but sometimes we're taught that we're not each other's medicine. We're taught that we're each other's enemy in our own house. And I think what that starts with is, am I an enemy to myself? Next slide, Mike. And we've already talked about this. From this day forward, I want you to notice how your mind and spirit and your body come together for your health. And when one is off, the other one can attune. If all of them are off, then maybe the spirit can help attune, or somebody can come and help you attune to it. You know, a therapist might help you with that. A pastor might help you with that. Or beautiful enough, those of you who have kids, they help you with that. How many people on this screen who have kids, just the touch of their child soothes them? And that child might not say the words, but sometimes they do say the words. Daddy, you're a little upset. Daddy, you look upset. And then daddy's like, what do you mean? I'm not upset. But that child knows, because that child is not disconnected from their body and their spirit. Their spirit, mind, and body is more connected because the world hasn't beat it out of them. Unless, of course, they've gone through some trauma, significant trauma. So your mind, your body, and your spirit are as one. So satisfaction, nutrition, activities, your attitude. Now, I know Michael Carter Jr. Can identify with this. I'm gonna put him on the spot. When he sees animal food, that impacts his mood.
Correct.
Because he has a plant-based lifestyle. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm just saying correct. You are correct.
That impacts his mood. And because he knows what some of those consequences are. So if we're having a dinner and there's not the kinds of food that are healthy for him and what he eats, that affects the harmony in the room. So at some point he learned how to cook those foods, and this is part of his lifestyle, is helping people eat in a healthy manner. Mind, body, spirit connection. And I also will say too, y'all know you smile when you see that certain kind of cake that you like. And you happy when the person comes through the door. How many of y'all had cake from the person you don't even like, but you like the cake? Or the person that you like can't cook. And that impacts your relationship. And I'm gonna get on the men. I think the men on here probably cook. But you know, you're sitting around hungry and you wait for somebody to cook. And you're 40 years old and you can't cook an egg. No disrespect, because Greg can tell you this. My father at age like 60 or something, he put a rice cake in the microwave and turned the microwave on.
Yeah, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He was no slacker. But, you know, that was part of the role that he and my mom had. That was a trade-off. You know, she took care of the food, he took care of the other stuff outside the house, and so on and so on and so forth. But when he didn't have his food, his body wasn't functioning correctly, and his spirit wasn't functioning correctly. Next slide, Mike. Okay, so I wanted to share this with you because when people try to minimize people's mental health, this is an easy thing to show people and an easy thing to relate to. And that's called emotional intelligence. And there are 5 factors in emotional intelligence. And I'm going to play around with this a little bit by just picking one. Okay? I'm going to pick one, but I'm going to just name the other 4. So motivation, social skills, empathy, and self-awareness. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with self-regulation. Okay, so let's say you don't have self-awareness. You think that you empathize well with people. You believe that your social skills are on point. You're managing all your relationships. You're motivated. The farm's moving, you know, you're selling product, You got all these good relationships, and you know you're eating right, you're exercising right, and then one day you wake up and you cannot get out of bed. Because at some point you tamp down your sadness. Because it looked like everything was fine. But every time you said, well, I need to tend to this, I need to, you know, pray, or I need to see a counselor, you tap that down. Because you tap that down because you felt like without any judgment, you needed to keep on going. But then that day you couldn't get up. This is why it is an ongoing lifetime task to manage your emotional life. And as you age, what is your brain? How does your brain change? I'm going to go back. I don't know if we have any teenagers on the screen, but as a teenager, you are now 15 years old or 16 years old. The size of your brain and the capacity of your brain is at its maximum. So all of a sudden, you look at your parents and you do know more than you knew before. And they're looking at you like, who is that person? He thinks he knows everything. But biologically, that brain has grown in a way that it knows everything. But that doesn't mean that that teenager is self-aware or has social skills or is even motivated. So the caregivers and the parents around them have to be emotionally aware enough to know, look, that boy is not, that boy thinks he knows everything, or that girl thinks she knows everything. Okay. Of course, that doesn't go well in everybody's household, but the understanding that the person is smarter and has more access to more information and more understanding is necessary. And how do you channel that into motivation? How do you channel that into responsibility and self-regulation? So over the lifetime, you may have mastered motivation, but let's say when you get a certain age and you're working on the farm and you can't work like you used to work, will you be self-aware enough to know, I need to use my social skills and allow somebody else to come in and help? Or have you only worked so much on your own that you don't have any relationships to call on? Or have you cussed everybody out because you can't manage your emotions? And now people have no empathy for you as your crops die and your animals can't be taken care of and you can't get the seeds that you need. So when people tell you that an emotional life is simple, talk to them about emotional intelligence. Because we cannot separate these things from our physical bodies and our spiritual bodies and from the land. We won't go into this tonight. We can talk about this at some other time. All of us have had land loss at some level. And that cuts through your whole body and your mind and your spirit. And it takes you back to remembering how that happened. And also to the people who may have given you the land or passed the land on. You also have memories in your body of other things that happen on that land. So do not allow people to minimize your emotions and your spirit and how they all resonate in your body. I said a lot there. I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask Mike to move to the next slide and then see if there are any questions or comments as we hit 7 o'clock. Questions or comments off of what I just said, because I just said a lot. Is anything resonating with folks that they want to speak out to? Go ahead, Nicole.
So, a question that kind of baffles me is that I work with a lot of Black farmers, and they wear several hats. So they're accountants, they are doctors, they are botanists, they are everything in one. And so, and the history behind being a Black farmer in the US, as somebody who is from Ghana, getting into the country and experiencing those kind of things, it's just so hard on Black farmers specifically to navigate the world around them and still keep their minds sane.
Yes.
And so the question then is, yes, we have, everybody is talking about, yeah, you have to be able to balance all of this, but it's the how, and how do you then open up to saying I need help? Because a lot of them don't necessarily know the how to say I think I need help in this area. They just keep going because that's all that's survival thing in there. And so if you could probably give some few tips on that, that would be great.
Yeah, and I'll jump into that because we're going to get to that. I think one of the things that somebody in that circle has to be the one who speaks to it. And I'll just use a selfish example. Mike is asking us to speak to that tonight. So once we leave this, we will have the responsibility first to take care of ourselves around this, and then to say something. Because Nicole, what you're pointing out is this trauma and this burden, as well as the joy of being a Black farmer, is passed down on people's bodies. And it cannot be intercepted alone. And that's part of what I see happening at a smaller level in our little pocket in Virginia, which is, how does another Black farmer talk to another Black farmer? And some of it is based in commerce, but this is the thing that I think we have to start breaking down, is there's got to be some relational pieces, and the gentleman spoke to that. There's got to be some relational pieces where we start to build up trust. So if I tell him I'm going to be on his farm on Friday, I have to be there. And if we're around each other more, eventually somebody needs to break the ice and begin to talk about these things. And I'm not offering that people need to talk about their feelings in traditional ways. But I think part of it, Nicole, is listening. Because this is what I tell Michael all the time. We are talking about it. We're just not acknowledging. When somebody says their back is hurting, with a child, we might understand that that's an emotion, but with an adult, we might ignore it. Go ahead, Greg.
I hear what you're saying in reference to, I'm hoping that, by the end of this, maybe you'll get to how do you address a person per se that is an issue, who, they may have an issue like you just mentioned. They may have back pain problems. They may have foot pain problems. They may have a physical or a medical condition that's causing them to respond that way. And you listen and you listen and you listen, and it's still, you get no feedback from them as far as something positive, and it's negative. I don't know if you're gonna get to that later, because you bring up a very, very interesting point.
Yeah, let me address that from a professional as well as a personal perspective. What I have to accept as a counselor, as an educator and as a son, a brother, a husband, a friend, is I can only take responsibility for what I do. And if I feel like I'm doing all I can do, I just have to rely on somebody else to support me and where I am not going. Does that make any sense? Yes, it makes a lot of sense, but that's what I got to sit with is I cannot change anyone. All I can do is bring the resources. All I can do is appeal to them, because this is part of what happens. If three of us change the way we do things, it makes it harder for the other person to do what they're doing. So if I'm not angry and I'm stating my concerns and I keep working on that, that's all I can do. Now, in the case of someone who's suicidal, you know, we're gonna get to that in terms of intervention in that way, because everybody really needs to look at what's available in their specific area. But these are hard kinds of things where people have done their life a certain way their entire life. And I think for me, the biggest thing is to listen, go back and work on myself, and then try something else. And then try to get more people healthy. And what does that mean, healthy? More people aware of what their triggers are. So if you know certain kinds of things are going to get you upset, are you ready for that when you confront it? Because there's no quick fix to the kind of behaviors that you're talking about. And what I try to do is I'll just give y'all an example. You know, I'm a diabetic. You know, I have been trying, quote unquote, to cut back on certain kinds of things for 10 years. So I understand for me, that is hard to overcome. So when I'm dealing with a client or a family member, I have to understand this is hard for them to overcome. So I have to sit with that. And I think also go to this place where we understand that people are 100 times more complicated than we want to acknowledge. Because some people, if you're coming to help them, they can smell that a mile away. Some people, if you're coming to help them, because they're so full of, let's just say, they're so full of substances that they can't hear you because they've been putting that armor on by drinking their feelings away. So they have a sense of when somebody's trying to intervene with them. And I'm not saying we give up, but I think the thing that works the most for me is I have to keep working on myself and keep trying, and then at a quiet time, express my concern. And then eventually you got to put up your boundaries. And that's hard on a farm because people have ownership of certain things. And if they're ruining it for everybody else, that's going to be very hard. So I tend to try to lean into the healthier people and figure out what we can do in that context. I know that didn't answer it, because this is what I also have to say is each situation is very different, because you got to know the family dynamics. You got to know the history. So for example, you know, I'm gonna be a little transparent. We're walking on a lot of history on our farm. Some of it is known and unknown. And we have to acknowledge that the known and unknown history impacts all of us. And sometimes that's that trauma response. Somebody unmuted, go ahead and speak, and then I'll acknowledge that I didn't answer the question. I started digging into the question. Somebody unmuted. Greg, does that get you any closer?
Oh yeah, definitely. definitely. Appreciate it.
So we've already talked about how complex a human is. And the thing about what I have here on the screen, these are ironically taken from the trauma literature, but they are very consistent with what farmers need. And if there's a deficit in some of these areas, then that could be a challenge for those who are working with that farm or those who are working with their family. And I'm going to go to the middle one, and I'm gonna take y'all back a little bit to some instinctual stuff. So when I remember my uncles, my grandmother, my father, my cousins, sometimes they couldn't figure out what was going on with a crop or an animal, and they touched that animal. Or they touched that crop, or they touched that seed. And they developed a touch with planting certain kinds of things. Some farmers would go to other farmers because they had a certain touch with cows or a certain way of growing a certain kind of thing. We have to be able to share those because we all are not always going to be resilient. We may get an illness, a mental illness that doesn't allow us to bounce back and be up at 5 o'clock to feed the cows. And maybe somebody needs to take that slack. We may not be able to regulate our emotions when we're communicating about plant loss. Or we might not even have the words to speak about what we're speaking about. Because that's why I keep bringing in spirit. Sometimes your words might not get it, but your body language might get it. And that body language looks like, yeah, I'm going to show up. And I'm going to listen. And yeah, there are going to be people in our families, in our circles, and in our farm circles that don't have these skills. But these are very important to our work as humans, but also as farmers. Next slide, Mike. So just a generic definition for mental health, a wide range of conditions that affect our thoughts, mood, and behavior. Mental health, as we've already established, is an essential part of being well, because you know, all of you know somebody who may have physical challenges, but mentally they compensate for those challenges, and they're beautiful, bright people. But we cannot diminish how much that emotional state influences all of our functions. And this is what I want us to, if you write a note down, a lot of this is about how we respond. Because at some point, all of us are going to have challenges in that emotional realm. How do we respond? And one of the ways that we really want to start working on is responding to other people by not using common terms so often. We call people off in the head. We call them mental. It's become popular to call people bipolar, and to make up all kinds of words about people who are struggling with their humanity. I'm sure all of us have been called something of this sort. And we've called other people something of this sort. But our mental health and our mental well-being is how we need to look at conditions that we've already identified that affect our thoughts, mood, and behavior. And we are a thinking being, but we're also a feeling and acting being. European society puts a primacy on thinking separated from feelings and behavior. And we can look around the world and see how that operates. Next slide. Okay. And, you know, just to say a little more, a mental disorder is something that notes a significant disturbance in the way people think, emotional regulation, and or behavior. So the example Greg was using, there's probably a significant disturbance in thinking, emotional regulation, and behavior. And we've seen that. And it's associated, at least for the people outside who acknowledge it, with distress, impairment in functioning, or risk and self-harm. Okay? And I want to name this. You know, we can play with our words, but all of us are medicating ourselves in some way, shape, or form, whether it be alcohol, whether it be food, whether it be withdrawing food from ourselves, other kinds of medicinal things that we use. And we don't want to put shame around that. We just want to notice that and know that anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, these are real significant impairments that people that we know encounter every day. And they don't discriminate on farms. As a matter of fact, the data says that in rural areas, suicide is more significant, statistically significant, and percentage-wise than in urban areas. I think at some point, I think it might have been 2019, the amount of suicides amongst farmers went up 40%. So, and then if you look at the data for African-American children and teenagers, the suicide rate has increased exponentially over the last several years. So this is a thing that when I was growing up, people considered it a non-thing, a no thing. And I don't know if that was true or not, but it's certainly documented that mental health disorders are significant and need to be paid attention to. I think we're much more familiar with neurodevelopment disorders, which get in the way of us being able to do intellectual, motor, language, or social functions. And the one that's oftentimes most popular is more well known as attention deficit hyperactive disorder and other kinds of disorders. You know, we won't dig too far in that tonight, but I just wanted to note that these things that we are working with and working around are very real. And in many ways, they're very science-based. And they don't take out any of the factors that we've talked about up to this point. Next slide. Okay, let's do a couple of these common myths. Counseling and therapy is only for crazy people. Okay, counseling and therapy are for people who choose to get assistance with something that's not working well for them. There should not be any judgment about who gets that. I can tell you we have a bigger problem. We have a bigger problem that we have a shortage of counselors and therapists in the country, and we have a larger shortage of therapists and counselors that are people of color and who know our culture and who know our ways of knowing and our ways of being. So we really don't have the time for the mythology of quote unquote crazy people. No one will understand the challenges that I have. That is yet to be seen. A counselor and therapist's job is to understand from your perspective, to develop a relationship with you such that what you share with them, they're able to understand it and to understand it from your perspective, and then use their skill in concert with you to work your way through it. A good therapist is not going to be telling you what to do. because every human, when they weigh into a therapeutic, they weigh into a therapeutic relationship, some stuff they're going to withhold, some stuff they're going to withhold because they don't recall it, because their brain is not allowing them to access it. So why would I be about telling you what you should do? I can make some recommendations and we can work on those, but it doesn't work once you walk out of that room. I'm gonna give you a great example. I do, I don't do children's grief work right now. I work with organizations who do it. And in Philadelphia, we ran support groups for children and adults. And in the children's group, we would say, your emotions are fine. It's fine to be angry. It's fine to be sad. But what happens if we're not talking to the caregivers about the fact that we're telling the kids that, and the kid goes home and they're sad, and then they get a beating? This is a working relationship with a professional that has certain kinds of expertise, and saying that no one will understand the challenges that I have. It is my job to understand, but also, because I might not get to this, therapy is one piece of your care. Everybody needs a toolkit. Some people have prayer in the church. Some people have their football game. Some people have food. Some people have their relations with their partner. Some people have friends. Some people have their work. What's in your toolkit for your wellness? Because therapy doesn't solve all of those challenges, but it helps you put those in perspective. I'm gonna pick on the men on here. You know, you go to one therapist, doesn't work, and then you quit. How many times have you bought shoes and you had to buy another pair because they didn't work right? You don't want to give up because it didn't work, because that relationship might not have been work for you. You just might not be ready. And then I'm gonna do this last one. I do not have mental health problems. I would know it if I did. If that was the case, we might not be having this talk tonight. If everybody knew what their challenges were, and they went and they got help for them in other ways, we wouldn't have this conversation. Lack of self-awareness. I was trying not to be political, but everything's political. You know what lack of self-awareness does when you have people in governing bodies. You know what lack of awareness does when you have people in leadership positions. And they say there's nothing wrong with my thinking, but you just stood in the front of the room and cursed everybody out. You just treated your family horribly. And some people, I want to tell you all, aren't aware. And that might be a hard pill to swallow. They aren't aware. Not because I want them to think there's something wrong with them, but I want them to think about, how am I functioning? And am I functioning at the level that I really want to and need to? Mike, I see your hand. Come on in.
So, my bad, I had to get off mute. What strategies do you use to deal with people who aren't aware? Because that becomes a stressor for many folks, because if you're aware and they're not aware and you're trying to work together, live together, have Thanksgiving dinner together, at what point do they, how do you deal with that?
This goes back to what Greg said. Some of it is about, what's your relationship? Okay, so meaning, what is your long-term relationship? What is the relationship? Is it a spouse? Is it your child? Is it your boss? Because what I didn't say to you all, and I should have put it in this presentation, I'll do it next time, is all of the work that I do is about relationship and context. So you're going to say one thing to your partner and another thing to your child. One thing to your farm partner that you do this business with, and another thing to your other farm partner that you do business with. And some people, what ends up happening for me is it has to give me discernment about if I have choices, how do I make those choices? So for example, sometimes you have to excuse yourself from things that might mean something to you. So for example, if there's a business relationship that you have and you can't say to that business person, I don't like that you shorted me on those dollars, then that's something you're gonna have to look at. And can you sever that business working relationship? At some level, and this might sound taboo, we can't get out of our families. But we have to figure out how to set boundaries for ourselves in a way such that it's healthy for us. And I know when it comes to this, the tendency is to want to fix the other person. And what I will say to you is how do you make yourself more amenable to the shift and the pivot that you might have to make? I'll give you examples. I've had to call up folks that I've known for a while and say stuff to them. I might say something to them when we're amongst a bunch of my boys. I might raise my voice at another person because I know they don't hear it another way. But generally what's going to happen is you're going to have to appeal to the person more than one time and then keep working on yourself because you're the only one you can change. And this is the thing. What I want people to pay attention to is sometimes you bring energy to an interaction that you're not aware of. So if I'm already mad and I bring that energy to that interaction and I'm smiling, that person's picking up on that. Because it's not going to go down like the TV shows where the cameras come in and you do an intervention. That people do that, but that doesn't work for us. Things have gotten way too far before we end up having to do that. So it depends on the relationship that you had prior to. It depends on the kind of relationship. It depends on your communication style. It depends on their communication style. And sometimes you have to ask people, how do you let me know, or how do we let each other know that we need help? What's your signal that I need to help you? What do you think if I see this, I should intervene? Because the people closest to us, sometimes they're working so hard not to deal with what they need to deal with that they just aren't aware. So you got to establish that rapport over time and trust that you've done as much as you can in talking with someone. With a therapist, they're going to be a lot of other techniques. So as a therapist, I can't afford to push my person too far. So for example, they tell me they're coming in for a certain kind of issue, I have to develop rapport with them. So they will tell me and share what they need to share. I'll give an example. Sometimes when people come into therapy, they tell you everything first session. And guess what? They don't come back because they feel so embarrassed and they feel like, I can't look that person in the eye again because I told them everything. So part of what I do is we try to take things at a certain kind of pace. And I'm always trying to feel people and not push people too far. I'm not trying to burden the person who came to seek my help. Because the last thing somebody wants to pay you to do is to burden them more. So how do we negotiate what we work on? How do we talk about that? How do we make a plan? You might not even want to make a plan. You might just want to come in and tell me and not do anything about it. But I think you have to look at within yourself and say, okay, this person, I need to say this to them. But also, this is the harder part, y'all. You got to be checking yourself to see if you've done the work you've asked them to do. Have you thought about what you're doing? Have you gotten your help? Have you gotten your support? Because part of what you have to do is when you do these hard things, you got to have somebody to talk to too. Because there's oftentimes nothing harder than having a family member that you love or somebody in business that you really care about reject you and not take your feedback, not take your advice, and not take your help. And that's one of the things I've had to get used to is people sometimes don't want it. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I asked this just because I'm a little older than you are, Kevin. So
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
my thing is a little bit more antiquated, but because you hear this term all the time, you need to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, what work is it? And number two, I know you've had this experience growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You're working on a team project. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing everything you need to do on the team, on the project
Mm-hmm.
to make the grade. And then the other person doesn't do the work and you still get F.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Well,
can
I
do
never
the
got
work.
an F behind that,
Well,
but anyway.
not you, but people like you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But just saying that, you can do the work, and then because other folks haven't did the work, it makes your effort less productive or futile in terms of where you're trying to go with whatever established. Because I can do the inner work myself and be the most refined person possible for myself. And if that individual that I'm encountering hasn't, it becomes a challenge of how does their actions or can their actions unravel my work that I'm trying to do, because we're trying to get to a point of some level of agreement or understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and it's becoming such a cliche thing of saying, do the work. I hear that at conferences and stuff all the time. What does that entail?
Yeah, the work for me, the work for me is you have to continue. I think the first piece of the work is you have to accept, well, you don't have to. I'm suggesting that you accept that you're pivoting all the time, because there may be one person who's obstructing, but there's obstructions out there constantly for us. But some are closer to us. And you have to decide, am I going to stay with that, or am I going to move in another direction? And that might be a loss that you might have to take. And that doesn't sound nice, but when I say do the work, that's what I mean. Because you cannot change other people. And the work might be, hey, I will be clear about no longer being able to be in this relationship in this way, and therefore I have to build something else for my own wellness and the wellness of me and my family. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about how you already have to do that on a daily basis, particularly as people of color. We always are having to work around things and to work around people. And at some point, there are some things that I can't tell you to accept, but I know that there are things that I have to accept. And then that might be a significant loss for me. I don't recommend what has happened to a lot of Black families all around the country, is you try to convince people to keep the land, but then they get something else on their mind and you end up losing the land. And then you have to recover from that. To me, the work is to continue to be flexible and figuring out alternatives for yourself. Because there are some people we cannot move. And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about just things that we know about in terms of situations that we're aware of, but in general, they're going to be obstacles. And how can you use that obstacle to continue to do what you need to do? And sometimes it means taking a loss for a larger gain. And for specific situations, it just takes a lot of work to dig into that. Because I need to know the players, I need to know the person, and then we have to have a structure. Because oftentimes, you know, family interventions are done through professionals. And that's just not in farming. Because if we can't get something done, I feel like I need to support you and you need to support me as we figure out what the next steps are. I'm sure that's not a satisfying answer, but we're going to start this discussion tonight. Next slide. Go ahead, Greg.
When you speak to use that word for the larger gain, I mean, that larger gain, is that mainly directed towards yourself? I'm going to say mentally, and is it for the other person or for me, say me personally? When you say for the larger gain, is that a mental thing?
Great question. It's both and. So, for example, if I'm always trying to fix somebody and that breaks me down, there's no gain, because then everybody else around me loses. Because I might end up in bad health because I'm trying to change somebody else. But the other thing is, that's where I keep invoking spirit. There are changes that we don't have control of. Like, you know, and this might sound this hopefully this doesn't sound weird to anybody on here, but who chose us to hold that land? We couldn't have chose ourselves. Who chose us to be farmers? There's something else operating that in your belief system that for the greater good, these things will work out. And does that feel good? No, it doesn't necessarily feel good. But I know that if I try to fix all of my clients, y'all probably wouldn't even see me, because I'd be thinking about it 24 hours a day. And then I can't work, which means I can't make money. I can't afford it. Then my wife's trying to take care of me because I'm trying to fix everybody else. And I'll use the farm as an analogy. You have to put what you have into the farm, but then you got to lay down.
Right. Okay.
Because your body has to rest. Your mind has to rest. And you can only give as much as you can give. Because I want to fix people. First person I would fix would be myself. But it just doesn't work that way. Because people have to be willing to change. And this is the part that I want to invite people to understand. Once somebody makes a change, you might not like what that looks like either. Because when people make changes, then they start to point out stuff about us that we didn't necessarily see or know that we have to work on. Mike, and then we're gonna change slides. We're gonna move slides. Oh no, that's not Mike. I see Mobile. Mobile has their hand up.
So my comment was gonna be based on what Mike said about the phrase "just do the work," and I think even without knowing the particulars of, you know, what the work is, like, you have to have a clear vision. What are you trying to accomplish? And then you'll, you know, inevitably you'll know what the work is. You might know might not know all the minute details, but it just brings me back to a comment that I heard years ago. And the comment was, ignorance on fire is better than knowledge on ice. Basically means you might not know everything, but do something.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Because if I don't have a vision and I'm trying to switch somebody up, when they switch up, do I have a vision? Or did I use all my energy trying to switch somebody up? And people are seen as getting in the way of our vision. I can't argue with people about that. Just can't argue with people about that. But I do know that when you work on yourself and you find other people that want to go with you, you might not get exactly what you want, but eventually you may get what you need. And this is the thing that I want to go into a little bit. Part of what I was going to talk about is there's always going to be some loss in all of this. But overall, I just feel like the gain will always be higher. And it might, as Greg said, it might not be in things, but it might be in your sanity. Because this is the thing, your sanity is very important. And we can't allow it to be at somebody else's cost. And we got parents on here who sacrifice for their children. And they've been doing that. They were doing that before their children were born. And that doesn't mean that their health and their sanity isn't important. Move that slide from the mic, even though I didn't answer your question. The reason why I put this up here is because, and I think it's apropos, is that these mental health challenges that we have are very, very complex. So having simple solutions around making people and helping people move through these, it's just never that simple. So if somebody's depressed, oftentimes what we focus on are the labels. But what I ask people to do is just look at the symptoms and how that person may need a certain level of care. It might be medication. It might be having a primary care physician who diagnoses them with depression and then makes a referral to a therapist. And this is if the person has health insurance, if they're willing to go to the doctor. And I wanted to share this is because this is probably why people are very frustrated at times, of the complexity of our human problems that are not easy to overcome. And many people some people even function well with depression and these symptoms. But at times, things get so severe that they think about hurting themselves, dying, and hurting other people. So look at these. If someone that you're supporting and or in your family or you are struggling with all of this, I can't expect you to pivot quickly. You might not be able to pivot quickly. But what I want you to think about is not the labels, but how this is impacting the person. And all of us probably have had some of this, and it doesn't mean you're depressed. you know, we need diagnostics for that. In terms of seeing a therapist or a counselor or an MD. And to me, the diagnosis matters only to the extent that you're able to identify what the challenges are. And then for some people, insurance pays for diagnosis. Whereas if you don't have one, the insurance might not pay for it. But what's important is what's under that line. How do we intervene with people to help them through these kinds of things? And there, you know, there's certain kinds of treatment. We can't cover all this stuff tonight, but I'm just trying to do a broad brushstroke tonight. Next slide. They might be a little bit out of order now that I'm looking at this. Yeah. So again, if someone is quote unquote depressed, these are issues that they're dealing with. And the reason why I put these is that in the literature, these are significant issues, particularly for farmers and particularly in rural areas. Next slide. We won't be able to watch this tonight unless Mike is able to pull it off. But this is a Black farmer, I think in Arkansas, and he talks about the challenge of having a friend who was a farmer who ended up completing suicide. But he also really talks a lot about how he tried to help him, how he's still dealing with that grief, how he's still dealing with that loss while he's trying to balance all of the financial, physical, emotional, and other aspects of farming that Nicole mentioned. Nicole mentioned those at the top, that basically a farmer is a jack of all trades and cannot leave any of them out while he balances his emotional, while he balances his actual physical and emotional life. Are you going to try to put that up, Mike? No, it's actually, you don't need to put it up because I just saw the time. I wasn't paying
You sure? Okay.
Yeah, don't, I tell you what,
I'll send a link out.
yeah, send that link out.
Yeah.
Go back to
worries.
the slides because I need to figure out.
No problem. I got you.
I'm gonna pause at 10 till, and then I'm gonna open up the mic, and then we're gonna close. So slide through to the common stressors. These are things that you all already know, but I'm just gonna mention them, and Mike's gonna send you this video.
Something like that.
No need to apologize. Common stressors.
Common stress is one of Zooms at 7:30 at night.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Common stressors. Financial, they all probably sound familiar. Physical, we've talked about those. Family, we just want to put a star by that because everybody who's farming has what they, you know, and this is the thing. When I say family, it's what you consider family. It's not what I'm saying is family. You have people in your life that are significant to you, and there's going to be strain on them. And you know, as a 100-year farmer family, that transition and planning is significant. And then there are emotional stressors. We've already talked about those. And then I might not put it on the slide, and we'll talk about this more in session number 2, that loss and trauma. That loss and trauma. We're going to talk about that next time we come back. Next slide. Yeah, I doubled up on the slide. I did put loss and trauma. So these are warning signs that you want to pay a little bit of attention to. We'll dig into those a little more. Next slide. And I want everybody to write this down. I don't know if everybody likes pies, but I want you to write down pies, and I want you to maybe try to check in with yourself or check in with somebody that you care about. And this is something that, you know, you can just monitor yourself. When you check in with yourself, what's the top of the mind thing that's happening in your body? That's P, physical. What's physically coming to your mind when you check into yourself? Is your neck hurting? Is your back hurting? What's going on? I, intellectual. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you sit down with yourself? Are you worrying? Are you thinking about the bills? Are you thinking about what you didn't do last night? Or what you didn't get to do on the farm today or for your family? And then E, emotional. What's the first emotion that pops in your head when you sit down and spend some time with yourself? And then the last one is safety. What's one thing you can do to make yourself feel safe, whether that's physically, emotionally, or spiritually? And this is a check-in that we use all around the country, all around the world, to do what I think one of our participants said at the beginning. How do we get grounded? And this is a good grounding. Could be a good technique to use again by yourself, or if you're checking in with people on the farm, we say for people who want to talk to us, you know, what's some language we can use? This is some of the language we can use. Everybody knows about pies. And then we're going to close, go to that last slide. And I was supposed to leave. Mike's going to send you some resources. You can go ahead. Go ahead, next slide. Keep going. Keep going. We'll do this exercise next time. We'll take care of this next time. Next time. Keep going. Keep going. I do want you to write down 988. That's the National Suicide Hotline. 988. Keep going. And this is what we want to end on, is each person maybe writing down something that they're using. It doesn't have to be this toolkit, but write down or note one thing that you want to use to take care of yourself, your mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, because you need a whole toolkit. Because part of the answer to some of these questions is it will come to you sometimes in the most quiet moment about what you do next. And all of us have experienced that, where we thought we didn't have the answer, and then the answer comes to us. And the next slide, and we'll close. Thank you for running through the field with us this evening. I hope something that we've shared will be helpful for you and your family. You know, one of my mottos is let us make good care and take good care. And Michael plans on having me back, and hopefully y'all will come back. And you can come on and close this if you need to, Mike.
Gotcha. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Carter. Won't call you your nickname.
It's all good. No, don't do
that. No. But thank you for this for sure. Definitely needed and appreciative. For those that still here, if you don't mind taking a moment to fill out the questionnaire or survey in the chat. I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. But that definitely, Kevin, is there any other questions or any further questions anyone has related to what's been shared today thus far?
And we didn't get halfway through, but that's okay.
and we will plan on doing this again in December. I want to say the second, probably the second Tuesday in December, if all goes well. And that's December 12th, I want to say, but you'll get an email. But anyone have any other questions or thoughts or comments they want to share with Kevin or ask Kevin?
Don't be shy.
Please don't be.
Thank you
Nicole.
for this evening.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Very, very informative. Thank you.
Oh, no problem, Reggie. Thank you.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Yes, so I just wanted to say thank you for the insightful session. Oftentimes, like culturally where I'm coming from, we don't necessarily talk about a lot of mental health things, and we just power through things. And so being in the American context where, I mean, you're encouraged to think through, you know, your mental health, to talk about things and to critically analyze how you're feeling about things, it's really important. And so I just want to thank you and thank Michael for organizing such an event. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Reggie, as well, for sharing earlier, and thank you, Nicole. I know your culture pretty well, and I know that mental health is definitely not something we talk about much there. Individuals are definitely denoted as being mad. Is generally the name of anyone who has any type of mental health challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. The moment you say you're going to see a psychologist or whoever, a counselor, they look at you like, uh-oh, he's gone.
Yeah, and some of that is well deserved because of the way the system has treated people with mental and physical and spiritual challenges, and that's part of the challenges. Is what generation will we be able to get on top of this with, not just with formal care, but informal care? Because Nicole, one of the things that we are not trying to do is to not act like some of the indigenous ways aren't helpful, because there's a lot of movement and other things that are very therapeutic for people that Western science will call madness until they appropriate it and make money off of it. And then when we say movement and they stop us from moving, then we lose that ability to metabolize a lot of these things that are in our bodies. So I think the goal of the people that I'm working with in my profession, people that I cling to, is what's the combination of ancient ways and current ways that can help us become more free? Because that's my whole thing in my grief practice, is we got to have freedom to do this stuff. And part of the freedom is having space. And I know that's part of everybody's struggle on here. Where can we go do what we need to do, unencumbered, and actually not under the guise of other people? And that's the beauty of folks having land too.
And as you mentioned that, Kevin, I'm thinking historically, drapetomania was a medical condition that was attributed to enslaved Africans who desired to run away for their freedom.
Right.
And farmers were Black farmers ideally are seeking freedom, which by the larger context of that definition would be seen as mad or insane or out of our minds for doing such a thing.
Yeah, there's a maddening context for the history of psychiatry in Virginia, because I think the first criminally insane facility, I think, was somewhere near Richmond, and they snatched people up based on what Mike said and put them in prison because they were trying to get free. So we are still working through that. So that mistrust is not unearned in some cases. And my generation is trying to kick that off in terms of those chains. And for those who are, there's a new text that just came out actually on Tuesday, and I think it's called Decolonizing Therapy. So there's a movement out there that speaks to what you all are speaking of. It's called Decolonizing Therapy. So I don't want you all to think that where we're at is where we need to be at. We need to make a big transition so that there won't be as much stigma, but also there'll be therapeutic ways of knowing and doing that are healing for us. Because medication is necessary, but oftentimes it is the fail-safe for clinicians. Other thoughts, questions? I'm open because if you had a question that you were thinking about asking before, go ahead and ask it, or just say what you need to say.
No question, but when you talk about the medication thing, it's basically thinking about one of the initial questions you asked, which is about, what do you have on your land for healing? You know what I mean? And when I was over at Mike's farm, we were talking about different plants and things that people call weeds, and he was just like, well, it's actually not a weed, it's something that you could eat. You just got to know your land and know what you can do with it, And I forget exactly what it was, but he was like, over here it's considered a weed, but back in Africa, it's like
yes.
I don't know if it's that delicacy, but it's basically like you could eat it. You just have to be aware of how to, I don't know how to say it, how to know, basically, get in tune with the land.
Right. I mean, my mom used to pull sassafras and put it in the hot water, grind it up and put it in the water, and we would drink it. There's a green that grows naturally that we would eat. So, but now we deal with the chemicals, and the chemicals are, and again, I'm not a doctor, but there's evidence that a lot of this is attributing to the increase in mental health challenges is the kinds of things we're putting in our body. And at the minimum, it's not healing us for sure. But I'm not going to ever criticize folks who need medication to function on a daily basis. I'm just not going to do that. Because people actually need that until they find alternatives.
And as you say that, Reggie, as you say that, I know I have a in my fields, so weed in there called plantain. And if I showed it to you, you would know exactly what it was. I'm sure you got it in your fields as well. But if you ever go to a grocery store and you look up Metamucil is nothing but plantain seeds.
That part.
So we literally have, a whole medicine cabinet in our backyard. Literally in our backyard that we pay money for when we get constipated to deal with our issues, and we have it in our yard. And I think it's somewhat, it's a analogy or a metaphor for our life and living, that our medicine, our health, as Kevin was saying, is amongst each other and usually in our backyard. That we are our own medicine.
Yeah, and I don't know this. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Also, and this is kind of the impetus for even doing this workshop is, and future workshops. We'll do another one in December, hopefully another one in January, and then some more in the field at the farm throughout 2024. But to get us used to seeing medicine again, because I think we're so used to seeing medicine at CVS or behind the counter in a bottle, and really losing and not recognizing the medicine that's within us, that's in our reach, that's free, and that's much healthier with no side effects that, you know, and it's free. It doesn't require you to have a prescription card or healthcare insurance to buy your medicine. That we and the land, the plants, the people are that potent medicine that we need.
Mhm, mhm. And Mike, I know that, and Reggie, I appreciate you saying that vision part, or whoever said that vision part, because I know Mike has a vision, and part of it, it's just having this conversation, opening my eyes, because I know that we were pretty darn healthy, and we weren't getting that stuff from the counter. And I don't know, Mike, where's isn't somewhere at Harvard that they've taken all the natural things and put them under study and turned them into pharmaceuticals? I think it's
There are
someplace.
numerous. There's a location in Nigeria. I know the International Tropical Center. There are other locations. Every pharmaceutical in this that we take is based around some plant.
Yes.
Either a chemical derivative of it or a derivative of it that's ultimately turned to a chemical. But yeah, every medicine is based upon a plant.
Yeah. And I have a hard time. My doctor friends don't like that conversation, but it is what it is. And I know they have to do what they have to do. Perhaps we need to do what we have to do. So,
and this is a good book that kind of discusses that, The Lost Language of Plants by Stephen Billner. I'll send a link out for that as well.
Okay. Appreciate it. Yeah. So I'm gonna go a little further into some of the things in terms about how to access care in December. And Mike, I'll probably talk a little bit about seasonal challenges that people are having, not just in the commercial realm, but in the actual body realm. As we all sitting here trying to adjust to the time change, and then the speeding up of the holiday season. So as that changes, so does other things. So we'll talk about that.
Awesome.
Okay. As long as this was helpful, we'll come back and we'll do it even better.
Anyone else have any questions or comments, thoughts they want to share?
I think we should make a shirt to say "Make Weeds Great Again."
I'm already on it. I'm already on it.
I wear that hoodie all day long.
Yeah, sorry. By the next session, you should see Kevin in a hoodie. We all have it. It's all family on the call at this point.
You know, it's weird though, because now
make sure you put an S on it. You're gonna
I
get
got
locked
you.
up.
It's gonna be S.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna be S.
Yeah.
There'll be two versions of it.
Yeah, because of our disconnect, it's like people now associate the outside with allergies and being sick rather than being well. It's just weird.
It is.
Because our body can't fight it off because we're not used to being out there. We're used to getting it out of a pill. But anyway, we could talk about that all night. But I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the dialogue. I proceed in the spirit that you all are doing, that we're doing this work together. And this was exciting. So let's keep it together for each other.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Again, if you get a chance, fill out the survey in the chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. I think our next workshop is on Tuesday around social media and marketing for farms. Then on Thursday around agritourism, and then next Monday around capital, how to turn your farm into capital that you can turn into acquisition to buy things. We got a full November coming up, and then Kevin hopefully will come around again December 12th to work on seasonal realities with all these changes that he just mentioned, which, you know, Christmas starts in August now.
Yep.
Daylight
Yep.
savings time is crazy. So yeah, thank you again, Kevin.
All right,
Everyone
thank
have
you.
a great night.
All right, y'all have a good evening. Be well.
All right, you all take care. Thank
All
you
right.
all for coming out.
Thank you all. Good night.
Night.